What if the most devastating playoff loss in WNBA history was actually the turning point for the Indiana Fever? The 2025 season wasn't supposed to end with Stephanie White holding back tears in a Las Vegas locker room. Yet sometimes, the greatest victories are hidden inside heartbreak. This is the untold story of how 6 injuries, questionable fouls, and 1 hospital emergency created the most shocking playoff game ever, and how what followed after the buzzer might change the Fever forever. The Fever entered 2025 chasing a championship dream. But by mid-January, that dream seemed shattered. Caitlin Clark's recurring ankle issues kept her sidelined for weeks. Sydney Colson tore her ACL in practice. Aaliyah Boston battled knee inflammation. Sophie Cunningham played through an MCL injury that should have ended her season. And Dam Iris Dantas spent crucial games in concussion protocol. A team built for dominance could barely field a healthy starting 5, but that's when everything shifted. Instead of collapsing, the Fever played with raw urgency. Stephanie White scrapped her old playbook and embraced a new philosophy. Free-flowing basketball built on instinct and trust. Suddenly, the results spoke for themselves. With just 7 healthy players, they stunned the Minnesota Lynx in the Commissioner's Cup. They forced the Phoenix Mercury into 3 straight overtime thrillers. Analysts called it luck. It wasn't. Something powerful was forming behind closed doors. Against all odds, the Fever clawed their way into the playoffs. Their reward? A first-round matchup with the 2-time defending champion Las Vegas Aces. On paper, it was supposed to be a sweep. Vegas had Io Wilson at MVP level, Jackie Young dominating both ends, and a roster built for another title run. But Indiana had something Vegas didn't. Resilience forged through pain. And what happened in that playoff series would redefine what it meant to fight, fall, and rise again. Both ends of the floor told a story of extremes. Las Vegas entered the series loaded with talent, depth, and a roster built for another championship run. Indiana, meanwhile, was patching things together, signing players off the street just to have enough body for practice. Most experts expected Vegas to sweep in 3 games, maybe 4 if Indiana caught a lucky break. But no one could predict the chaos that unfolded in Game 5 from the opening tip in Las Vegas. Everything spiraled into madness. The Fever were already missing key rotation players, forcing head coach Stephanie White to experiment with lineups that had never shared the court before. Early in the second quarter, disaster struck when Kelsey Mitchell, Indiana's leading scorer, collapsed mid-play. The medical staff rushed her to the hospital for severe dehydration and cramping, leaving the Fever without their offensive engine in an elimination game. Things only got worse from there. Aaliyah Boston picked up her 3rd foul on what slow-motion replay clearly showed was a clean block. Her 4th came moments later on a play where she barely made contact. By the time she fouled out with 27 seconds left in regulation on yet another phantom call, the Vegas crowd itself began booing the officials. But amid the officiating storm, the Fever refused to fold. Odyssey Sims delivered performance of the ages, dropping 27 points and hitting clutch shots every time Vegas tried to close the door. A pull-up jumper here, a twisting layup there. She simply wouldn't let Indiana's season end. Lexi Hull, an unheralded name before the playoffs, made key defensive stops and buried timely shots that stunned the home crowd. Grace Berger stepped up to run the offense in Mitchell's absence, threading passes that defied belief. Meanwhile, the refereeing reached absurd levels. Indiana players absorbed hard hits with no whistles, while Vegas earned free throws for the slightest contact. Social media erupted with outrage. Fans, former players, and analysts accused the league of protecting its marquee franchise. The officiating controversy grew so loud it overshadowed one of the most intense games of the postseason. And yet, against all odds, Indiana forced overtime. With Boston gone, Mitchell hospitalized, and every call seemingly against them, the Fever showed the heart of a true underdog, turning a game that was supposed to be a blowout into an unforgettable battle of will and defiance. Even with everything stacked against them, the Indiana Fever refused to quit. The overtime period became a living embodiment of what the team had stood for all season: grit, unity, and an unbreakable will. Players who were never expected to play key minutes suddenly became heroes. Katie Lou Samuelson drilled a crucial 3-pointer that tied the game late, while Tammy Bentley fought through exhaustion to secure multiple offensive rebounds, keeping possessions alive when every second mattered. Despite tired legs, a depleted roster, and mounting foul trouble, Indiana matched Las Vegas shot for shot until the very end. When the final buzzer sounded and Vegas escaped with a narrow 4-point win, something extraordinary unfolded. The entire Aces team walked over to the Indiana bench, not to celebrate, but to show their respect. Io Wilson was seen telling head coach Stephanie White that Indiana deserved to win. Jackie Young embraced every Fever player one by one, acknowledging the greatness they had just witnessed. Even the Vegas crowd, which had been roaring for their team all night, rose to its feet in a thunderous standing ovation as Indiana left the court. It was a moment that transcended sports, an acknowledgement that heart and resilience could command more admiration than a trophy ever could have. In the locker room afterward, Stephanie White delivered what many are now calling the most powerful speech in Fever history. She didn't rant about the officiating, the injuries, or the unfairness of the situation. Instead, she spoke about grace, dignity, and the meaning of perseverance. She reminded her players that they had shown the basketball world what true heart looks like when everything goes wrong. That speech, recorded on a team assistant's phone, went viral within hours, surpassing 10 million views across social media platforms. Players from across the WNBA reposted it, calling it the defining moment of the 2025 season. The days that followed brought even more stunning revelations. Kelsey Mitchell's hospital evaluation uncovered an underlying health condition that had quietly affected her performance for months. She had been battling through symptoms that would have sidelined most athletes, yet never complained or made excuses. Meanwhile, data analysts began breaking down Aaliyah Boston's foul record, and what they found was alarming. Statistically, she had been called for more fouls per minute than any player in playoff history, despite one of the lowest contact rates in the league. The numbers painted a troubling picture, suggesting something highly irregular had occurred during the series. Then came the twist no one saw coming. 3 days after Indiana's elimination, Stephanie White received a call from the WNBA Commissioner's office. The league was launching a formal investigation into the officiating of Game 5 after overwhelming evidence of inconsistency surfaced. Though they couldn't overturn the result, officials confirmed that serious mistakes had been made. For the first time in league history, the WNBA publicly admitted that officiating errors had influenced the outcome of a playoff game. The news sent shockwaves throughout the basketball community. When a full report was released in late January 2025, the findings were damning. 2 of the 3 referees from that fateful game were suspended indefinitely. Investigators documented 17 incorrect calls, 15 of which went against Indiana. The so-called phantom fouls on Aaliyah Boston were highlighted as inexcusable, undermining the competitive integrity of the contest. Though the outcome remained unchanged, the admission validated what Fever fans and players have been saying all along. That night in Las Vegas, they were battling more than just the Aces. What made the aftermath even more remarkable was how Indiana responded. Instead of dwelling on injustice, the Fever turned their frustration into motivation. Caitlin Clark, speaking publicly for the first time since her ankle injury, said, "This team reminded me what basketball is really about." Sophie Cunningham, still rehabbing from her MCL tear, posted on social media, "I've never been prouder to wear this jersey." The culture Stephanie White cultivated through adversity had transformed the Fever into something special, a team defined by resilience rather than results. That transformation began to ripple across the league. Free agents who once overlooked Indiana started showing interest. What was supposed to be a long rebuild suddenly became one of the most attractive destinations in the WNBA. Veteran players wanted to play for White after seeing how she handled the impossible, and younger stars wanted to be part of the culture being built in Indianapolis. The loss that should have crushed the franchise had instead become its greatest recruitment tool. Even more surprising was the loyalty from within. Not a single core player sought a trade or tested the market. Kelsey Mitchell signed a multi-year extension, despite holding significant leverage in free agency. Aaliyah Boston publicly declared her desire to retire as a Fever player. Their shared experience during the playoffs had created a bond that money couldn't buy. In an era when athletes often chase better contracts or easier paths to championships, Indiana's unity stood out as something truly rare. Beyond the fever, the Las Vegas series sparked a wider reckoning across the WNBA. The officiating controversy ignited league-wide discussions about accountability and fairness. Former players began calling for stricter referee evaluation systems, while coaches demanded transparency in officiating reports. Fans, too, became more vocal, not just supporting their teams, but demanding a more consistent and credible standard of play. What happened to Indiana became a catalyst for systemic change that could redefine how the WNBA is officiated in the future. But the real story isn't about blown calls or injuries. It's about what Stephanie White and her players discovered in that locker room after the heartbreak. They found a collective identity grounded in courage, compassion, and conviction. They proved that victory isn't always reflected on a scoreboard. Sometimes, it's about earning the respect of everyone who watches you fight through adversity. The 2025 Indiana Fever will be remembered not for falling short, but for redefining what it means to compete with integrity, unity, and heart. They lost a game, but in doing so, they won something far greater. The admiration of a league, the loyalty of their city, and the beginning of a new era built on belief. The 2025 Indiana Fever season will be remembered as one of the most inspiring stories in basketball history. Despite a roster gutted by injuries and setbacks that should have guaranteed failure, they fought with relentless determination. They pushed the defending champions to the brink, battling not only their opponents, but also adversity that few teams could have endured. What unfolded wasn't just a playoff series. It was a masterclass in perseverance, grit, and unity that will be studied for years to come. Looking ahead, the Fever's future has never looked brighter. With key players recovering and Stephanie White's powerful team culture now fully established, Indiana is no longer the league's underdog. They're a legitimate contender. Their fight in Las Vegas may have ended their playoff run, but also sparked a new beginning. Free agents across the league are drawn to their resilience, seeing Indianapolis as a destination built on heart and belief. What once looked like an ending now feels like the start of something legendary. Even their opponents took notice. After winning another championship, Aya Wilson called Indiana the toughest team she's ever faced, not because of raw talent, but because of their refusal to break. She described them as warriors, saying every team should fear the Fever going forward. When the league's best player says it about a team that just lost, you know you've earned true respect. This story proves that sports are about more than just wins and losses. They're about spirit, resilience, and finding strength in moments of despair. The 2025 Indiana Fever didn't lift a trophy, but they won something far more enduring: the hearts of basketball fans everywhere. Sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as defeats.